of those almost unavoidable songs that everybody seems to have covered at one time or another. Elvis, obviously, famously, and the Pet Shop Boys did a great version too. I'm going to focus on the Willie Nelson version, though, from 1982, I think, in the very guitar-friendly key of D. And I was thinking about doing this in drop D because even without a capo, as low as we can make it, that D, that open fourth string, which is the bass note for a D chord, it's not particularly low in the range of the guitar. But actually, I think it's okay, and there are plenty of places, in fact, where we extend that D chord down to the fifth and also down to the sixth string to give us a bit more heft in the bottom end. We've got a single 16-bar verse that goes round twice. Then we've got a bridge built on very similar material, which is just 8 bars, and then we come back for a final third verse, and the last 4 bars of that verse then repeat, and that's the end of the song. We've also got a little 2-bar intro that we can tack on at the beginning, which is a bit different. The song is really revolves around this descending bass line, and also there are some rising bass lines too, so plenty of that to get under our thumbs. And for the fingers, we'll have a look at a picking pattern that's going to make this sound a bit more authentic. But for now, let's just carve through the basic chords for the verse. Now if we look at the first 4 bars, we can already see this descending bass line in action. We've got D for a bar, maybe I, and then I've got this A with C sharp in the bass. Now I've got my third finger on the 4th fret of the 5th string for the C sharp. That's just a semitone below the D that we had. Now to the C sharp, and I'm barring across the 2nd fret with my first finger. Never mind that it's barring across all 6 strings. I'm not going to play the top string or the bottom string because I'm picking now, just for now anyway, with my thumb on the 5th string, and my 3 picking fingers are on the 2nd, 3rd and 4th strings. In fact, when we finger pick properly with a pattern, that's what we'll aim for. But for now, I've just got to kind of, just to articulate the chord, I'm just going to play those middle 4 strings. So that'll do, barring right across all the strings at the 2nd fret, and then a finger on the 4th fret of the 5th string, and that bar can stay there for the following chord, which is B minor. So we've had this bum, bum, bum in the bass, D, A over C sharp, B minor, and now halfway through that bar, we descend again now to an A, that's the open 5th string, for a chord of D over A. And we finish up that first 4 bars with G. We've got them all the way down to the 3rd fret of the bottom string, and on the very last beat we play an A again. So the whole of those first 4 bars, maybe I didn't love you 3, 4 quite as often as I could have 3, 4, 1, and that just repeats with a slightly different outcome. We get D again, maybe I didn't treat you, A over C sharp, and again our 2 beats of B minor, quite as D over A, good as I, and this time instead of coming down to G, we get as far as G sharp, and that's underneath an E7 chord. And that's simple enough to play it this way. I've got my 2nd finger on the 4th fret of the bottom string, 3rd finger on the 4th fret of the 3rd string, my little finger is up on the 5th fret of the 2nd string, and I've got the open 4th string adding the 7 to that E7 chord, that's the D. So I'm just going to play it that way. Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. That's quite a versatile shape. In a little while we're actually going to see that down here starting on the 2nd fret for D over F sharp, but that's the first 8 bars done. And now it's a bar of G. If I made you feel second best, to a bar of D. And now we've got a sequence of 2 beats each on G, and then D over F sharp. That's exactly the same as that E7 over G sharp, but now on the 2nd and 3rd frets, down to E minor 7. I'm keeping my little finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string there. That's where it was for the D over F sharp. Now it's E minor 7, so I'm putting a finger also on the 2nd fret of the 5th string. And now I've got 1 beat each of G with D in the bass. I'm keeping that little finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string again, and now I'm just playing open 4th, open 3rd, and then that 2nd string that's fretted on the 3rd fret. Now I'm extending it down as far as the 2nd fret of the 5th string, so that fingering is exactly the same as the E minor 7, but I'm not playing the bottom string. It's just so I can get this in the bass, which is in the original. And now we begin a rising sequence. A for 2 beats, B minor, A over C sharp, so we're going back up to D. You were always on my mind. Now we're going to go down to E minor 7 and come up again. E minor 7 to D over F sharp, G. You were always A7 for 2, on my mind for 2, and then we finish off with a beat each of G and A. So let's go from that last little bit from the bar of G. If I made you feel second best, 3, 4, G. I'm so sorry I was blind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. 3, 4. Maybe I didn't hold. And we're into the second verse, which obviously is exactly the same. Now, before we look at the bridge, let's just take a quick look at a couple of very versatile, very straightforward picking patterns we can use on this song, the sort of thing that I often use on ballads like this. Let's start off with this. In D, on a chord of D, it's going to be like this. That kind of a thing. So I've got my thumb on the 4th string. It has to be on the 4th string, that's the bass note, which means that my picking fingers have to be up on the top 3 strings. First finger's on the 3rd string, second finger on the 2nd string, and obviously the 3rd finger's up on the top string. And I'm going to play the bass note, so for D that's the open 4th string. Then I'm going to pick the 3rd string with my 1st finger. Then the top 2 strings with my 2nd and 3rd fingers together, before coming back to pick that 3rd string with the 1st finger. Easy enough? Maybe I didn't. And because we're playing it in 8ths, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and we play that pattern twice in a bar. So if we've got a whole bar of D, which we have in the beginning of the verse, we get to play that twice. As we move through the song, where I can, I'm going to move my picking fingers down from the top 3 strings to the 2nd, 3rd and 4th strings. It just creates a slightly mellower feel, so we'll get this. Maybe I didn't love you, and on, quite as often as I could have. I'm going to keep them on the 2nd, 3rd and 4th strings for G, even though my thumb moves down to the 6th string now. And I've got 3 beats of G. That 3rd beat, I'm just going to pick all the strings that are picked, the 2nd, 3rd and 4th strings, and the bottom string, because that's where my fingers are, for a single beat like that, and then the same thing for the A. And on. Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. If I made you feel second best, I'm so sorry I was blind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. So again, where I've got the opportunity to play the whole pattern, I will do if the chord lasts for 2 beats or more. But where we've got an odd beat there, like the 3 beats or the single beat, I'm just going to fill in with picking all the strings that are supposed to be picked at that point together. Okay, so that's a very simple idea. And for a variation on that, let's try this. This actually needs 4 beats to complete, so you're only going to play the whole pattern if you've got a single chord in a bar. Again, for D, I've got the thumb on the 4th string, my 1st finger picks the 3rd string, now my 2nd finger picks the 2nd string on its own without the 3rd finger picking the top string. And then back to the 1st finger picking the 3rd string. And now on the 3rd beat, 2nd and 3rd fingers do pick the top 2 strings again. And I finish off with my 1st finger picking the 3rd string, 2nd finger on the 2nd string, and again back to the 3rd string. Now otherwise, as before, we're going to move the picking fingers down as we like, and obviously the thumb too. Maybe I didn't love you quite as often. And where you've only got 2 beats for the chord, you're probably going to revert to the original pattern. Quite as often as I could have. But now, where we've got 3 beats, say for the G, we've got a legitimate pattern that fills those 3 beats, and then again we're just going to do a single beat thing for the A. Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. If I made you feel second best, I'm so sorry I was blind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. So we end up playing towards the end there, where we've got at least 2 chords per bar, pretty much what we did with the original pattern, but where we've got the luxury of 3 or 4 beats, then maybe that second pattern works. And of course there's things like hammer-ons, and that works quite nicely on a D, and you'll find various things that just happen to fall under your fingers to embellish what you're doing. Okay, the bridge. We actually have exactly the same pattern in the beginning. But now everything's compressed. There's only 2 beats on the D, and on the A over C sharp, B minor and D over A are 2 beats as before. We get straight onto the G, D over F sharp to E minor 7. So in fact it's tell me, which is going all the way down. Tell me that your sweet love hasn't died. So okay, Tell me that your sweet love hasn't died. Okay, finally a new chord. It's A7, but I'm using my little finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, going to A7, and then again, give me one more chance to keep you satisfied. This time it's just 2 beats of A7. Satisfied, and we get back into the verse. The 3rd verse kicks off with 8 bars of guitar solo, and then we pick up the lyrics for the 2nd verse. So this is the guitar solo. We pick it up from here. 2nd verse lyrics. Little things I should have said and done, I just never took the time. Now at this point it changes very slightly. We have the last 4 bars of the verse, but without the single beat of G and A at the end of that. So we get this. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. 2, 3, 4, and those 4 bars just repeat. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. And then we finish right there. So in fact, the 3rd verse is exactly the same. The first 8 bars are given over to the guitar solo. We pick up the lyrics of the 2nd verse, and the last 4 bars without the final 2 beats of G and A just repeat, and they go around twice, and that is the end of the song. Now, just before we go for a playthrough of the song, we still need to look at the intro, of course. On the Willie Nelson version, it's 2 bars of tinkly piano quite high up in the range. And I could play down here, 2 beats of G, 2 beats of D over F sharp, there's 2 beats of E minor 7, and as we saw in the bridge, we've got a single beat of A7 sus4 to A7. That leads us into the verse. But actually, to emulate something like what the piano does, we really need to move those chords up higher in the range. So for the G, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take what looks like a D chord, and I'm going to move it up to the 7th and 8th frets. I'm going to include the open 4th string there because that works and it helps to flesh the chord out. That's 2 beats of G. My D is going to be like this, with my first finger on the 5th fret of the top string, second finger on the 7th fret of the 3rd string, and then my 3rd finger's tucked into the 2nd fret of the 2nd string. Again, I'm going to put the open 4th string in there. I mean, it's supposed to be D over F sharp, but I'm not going to be playing that. So I've got 2 beats of the G, 2 beats of the D. Then I've got E minor 7, so I can play the open bottom string, that's easy enough. And I'm going to add these fingers here. First finger is on the 3rd fret of the top string, second finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, and then my 3rd finger is on the 4th fret of the 3rd string. That's going to give me an E minor 7. And then the A7 sus4 to A7, and I'm going to focus on that changing note on the 2nd string. And that's it. Okay, well, thanks for watching. Let's have a playthrough and hopefully see you on the next one. In fact, just before we go for a playthrough, let me tell you about the new book I've just finished and is now on sale, A Guide to Reading Music, which is 80 glorious pages of step-by-step and easy-to-follow information going from the very basics, such as the position of the notes on the treble clef staff, to the basic note values, and then it takes you through time signatures and key signatures and articulations and other clefs and all sorts of good stuff, and all of it supported by a comprehensive video here on YouTube that illustrates and gives you audio examples of everything that's in the book, and also gives you plenty of opportunity to check your progress. So if you are thinking of getting to grips with music notation and didn't know where to start, let me recommend to you this beautiful new book. Go out and get yourself a copy today. There we are. Okay, sales pitch over. Let's play the song. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I didn't love you quite as often as I could have. Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. If I made you feel second best, I'm so sorry I was blind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. Maybe I didn't hold you all those lonely, lonely times. I'm so happy that you're mine. Little things I should have said and done, I just never took the time. You were always on my mind. Tell me that your sweet love hasn't died. Give me one more chance. never took the time. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. That's it.